Winter was not just a season in the ancient world. It was a test of life itself. The land had turned to white silence. The rivers locked in ice, and the forest stood still as though even the wind feared to move. For the boring caveman and his tribe, the days had grown short, and the nights endless. Every breath came out like smoke. Every step broke through frozen crusts of snow. The tribe huddled in a dark stone cave, their fire burning low, the last of the mammoth fat melting away in the flames. Hunger had begun to speak louder than fear. Children whimpered softly under furs. Elders stared blankly into the glowing embers, and outside, the world groaned under the weight of ice. In that frozen silence, boring caveman knew, if they did not hunt, they would not see the spring. He stood at the cave's mouth, the wind clawing at his hair, and looked across the endless white. Somewhere out there, beyond the frozen hills, life still moved, the faint shadow of prey waiting to be found. The morning came pale and cruel. The tribe rose with slow movements, wrapping themselves in layers of animal skins, their hands stiff from cold. Each hunter carried a stone-tipped spear, a relic of survival passed down through generations. Boring caveman led them out of the cave, their footsteps vanishing quickly beneath falling snow. The world was vast and empty. No sound but the crunch of feet and the howl of wind through dead trees. Yet they pressed on, guided by instinct older than memory. The air bit their faces and frost gathered on their beards, turning men into statues of ice. Birds had vanished long ago, and only the sky's gray veil remained. Still, they searched for signs, a broken branch, a patch of disturbed snow, a scent carried by the wind. After hours, one of them pointed to faint impressions in the ice. Mammoth tracks, wide and deep, heading toward the frozen river valley. A silent spark lit in their eyes. Hope, fragile and rare, began to thaw the edges of despair. The hunters followed the trail for miles, weaving through ridges and icy plains. The world seemed endless, an ocean of white beneath a sky of steel. They moved quietly, conserving strength, their breath steady and rhythmic. At times, they paused to listen, to the whisper of wind, to the groan of ice beneath their feet, to the heartbeat of a world half asleep in frost. Boring caveman led them with patience, his eyes sharp, his senses tuned to every detail. The tracks grew fresher, the snow softer where a great beast had passed. He crouched, touching the imprint with his rough hand, still warm beneath the surface. The mammoth was near. The tribe crouched behind boulders, peering through the mist, and there, through the swirl of snow, they saw it. A massive shadow moved slowly across the valley floor, its breath steaming like fire in the cold air. It was a creature of power and memory, the last of its kind, feeding on frozen grass beneath a fallen tree. The hunters' hearts pounded, their fear mingling with awe. They had found their chance, and their fate. Preparation was silent and deliberate. The tribe spread out in a crescent formation, using the land shaped to their advantage. Some moved to the river's edge, where ice thinned and would crack under weight. Others gathered branches wrapped in animal fat, torches, to bring fire into the frozen hunt. Boring caveman watched the mammoth's slow movements, every step shaking snow from nearby trees. He whispered a short prayer, not to kill, but to survive. When the wind shifted, carrying their scent toward the beast, it raised its head and trumpeted a deep, echoing cry that shook the valley. The moment had come. Torches flared to life, bright against the gray storm. The hunters charged with cries that shattered the silence. Spears raised, fire in their hands. The mammoth roared and turned, stamping the earth, snow exploding in every direction. The ancient struggle had begun, man against nature, life against the cold. The ground trembled beneath its fury. The mammoth swung its tusks, scattering hunters like dry leaves. A spear struck its flank, another pierced its shoulder, and blood steamed as it hit the snow. The tribe moved as one, circling, shouting, hurling fire to drive it toward the river's edge. Boring caveman darted forward, his feet slipping on ice, eyes locked on the beast. The mammoth charged, its massive head lowering, but he sidestepped, thrusting his spear deep into its side. The sound that followed was not pain, but defiance, a bellow that echoed across the frozen world. The ice beneath began to crack. The beast staggered, its legs slipping, the ground giving way beneath it. With a thunderous crash, it fell into the river's icy maw. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of rushing water beneath broken ice. The hunters stood still, chests heaving, snow falling softly around them. It was over. The kill was theirs. They worked quickly before the storm returned. With stone blades, they carved through fur and flesh, their hands red but grateful. The mammoth's body provided everything. Meat for the tribe, bones for tools, hide for warmth, and tusks for shaping. It was not just a hunt. It was a promise of life. The hunters loaded what they could onto sleds made of branches and rope, dragging them back toward the distant cave. The journey home was long, the wind biting, but the fire in their hearts burned brighter now. Above them, the clouds began to break, letting sunlight pierce through in golden beams. Snowflakes glittered like stars falling upon the earth. For the first time in weeks, the tribe smiled. The frozen world, once merciless, now looked almost kind. That night, the cave glowed with warmth. Flames danced on stone walls, shadows moving like spirits from a hunt. The tribe feasted in silence at first, tasting victory, tasting survival. Children laughed again, elders told stories, and boring cavemen sat by the fire, gazing into the flickering light. Outside, the wind howled softly through mountains, but inside, life had returned. They honored the mammoth with carved bones, thanking it for its sacrifice. The fire crackled, sparks rising into the dark, as if carrying their story into the sky. Winter would still come, and hunger would still follow, but for now, they had won. And in the heart of that endless cold, humanity had proven once again that courage burns brighter than frost. Snowflake fire. Days turned into nights, and nights into whispers of survival. The blizzard outside raged for many moons, but within the stone walls of the cave, the tribe endured. The meat they had gathered from the great mammoth smoked gently over the fire, hung from wooden racks carved by careful hands. Its scent filled the chamber, a warm reminder of life in a world that had almost forgotten warmth. Boring Caveman sat near the entrance, his eyes fixed on the white wilderness beyond. The world outside looked endless, silent, and pure, yet he knew how cruel it could be. Every snowflake carried the memory of lost hunters, frozen rivers, and forgotten trails. But beneath that ice, the earth still lived, sleeping, waiting for the sun to wake it once again. The tribe had begun to understand that the cold was not their enemy, but their teacher. It had shown them how to endure, how to share, and how to protect. Each day, Boring Caveman would step outside, his fur coat heavy with frost, scanning the horizon for change. The storm still came, but their roars no longer frightened him. He had faced beasts larger than fear itself. Around the fire, the children would gather, listening as the elders spoke of the hunt, their voices low and rhythmic, echoing like ancient drums. The mammoth gave its life, one would say, so that we might live, respect the balance, or the cold will take it back. These were not mere words. They were law. The tribe had learned that survival was not about conquest, but connection. The fire, the beast, the snow, and the tribe, all were one story written by nature's hand. Outside, the northern lights shimmered faintly in the sky, painting colors across the frozen night. The hunters looked up in silence, seeing in those lights not just beauty, but promise, a whisper that spring would come again. As the moons passed and the storms began to weaken, the world slowly stirred from its icy slumber. The snow softened, dripping from the branches like tears of winter's end. Boring Caveman awoke one morning to the faint sound of water. The frozen river was breaking open, its voice returning after months of silence. The tribe gathered at the cave mouth, staring out at a world reborn. The white field shimmered beneath a pale sun, and tiny blades of green grass pushed through melting frost. Life was returning. The hunters smiled quietly, their faces lined with scars but alive with gratitude. They had endured the cruelest test of nature and emerged whole. The mammoth hunt had fed them not just with meat, but with meaning. Each child who had huddled by the fire would now live to see the new season, to grow strong and hunt their own someday. Boring Caveman walked the riverbank, where he had once fought beside the beast. The ice was thinner now, and he saw beneath the surface. The deep, Cold water flowing strong, endless, eternal. He knelt, cupping it in his hands, and drank. It tasted like memory, like the earth itself forgiving him for taking what was needed to live. Behind him, the tribe began to prepare for the coming warmth. Furs were mended, tools sharpened, stories retold by the firelight. The elders said the gods had spared them because they honored life, not because they conquered it. As the sun climbed higher, melting the last of the frost, boring Caveman looked up and saw birds returning, black specks against the silver sky, gliding toward a brighter world. The season of death had ended, and the season of life had begun again. That night, as twilight stretched across the valley and the fire crackled low, boring Caveman sat before the flames, silent and thoughtful. Around him, laughter echoed softly, the sound of life, the sound of survival. The mammoth's tusks now stood upright at the cave's entrance, carved and polished as a sign of respect. They were not trophies, but guardians, a memory made solid. Smoke curled upward, weaving through the cave's roof like a spirit rising into the stars. Outside, the sky burned with color, streaks of green and violet light dancing across the heavens, the aurora returning to bless the world once more. The tribe watched in wonder, their faces glowing in the firelight and sky glow. For a long moment, no one spoke. They simply felt the stillness, the peace that follows endurance. Boring Caveman thought of the hunt, of the fear, the cold, the roar of the mammoth, and the fire that saved them. All of it had become part of who they were. He realized that their story would not fade with the snow. It would live on, carved into bones, painted on stone walls, whispered to children beside the fire. It was not just a story of survival, but of unity, of man and nature moving together through the endless circle of seasons. As the flames dimmed and stars filled the sky, boring Caveman closed his eyes. The wind outside carried the soft call of wolves and the rustle of thawing trees. Tomorrow, they would wake to a world reborn. The deadly winter had tested them, but in surviving it, they had become eternal. Snowflake, fire,